And right now, I would like to introduce a special friend, a colleague, and a special human being, Kim Marie, who is an evolutionary astrologer. She is leading correspondence course and about evolutionary astrology. So if you want to learn more about her, you can go on her website or just speak with her directly. And today she's going to speak about Uranus in Aries, which is eminent. It's coming in March, and we can be prepared now. Thank you.
What do we need to do here? Let me practice. Aloha Huani. All right. We got it. So welcome everyone, and thank you very much for allowing me to speak in front of you. It's an honor on my end as well. And so my topic is Uranus and how it affects all of the different Uranus generations. I've got to make sure this stays in, so I'm going to fiddle with it just a little bit till I get her going. And so to start on this topic, I thought what I would do is start with a small little story. Let me ask two questions first. How many of you are excited about Uranus in Aries? How many of you are afraid? How many are both? Well, I want to talk about this 0-degree Aries point just for a second. I was blessed in my family to have a new little one come in. And yesterday was the 1-year birthday, solar return, for my new little niece. Her name is Macy Quinn. And she has her moon at 0 degrees Aries. And as I've observed her over this last year, it's dawned on me that these little ones who are coming in are not afraid. We're sitting here in all our fear and our chaos and all this change that's going on. And I'm observing this little soul, and she is so excited to be here. One more astrological tidbit about her. She's a Gemini rising, so astrologers know that those Gemini risings, the vocal cords start working as soon as they come out of the womb. So she's a 1-year-old, and when I saw her a few weeks ago, her first word, which she repeats constantly, oh, oh, ooh, all the time, all the time. That little 0-degree Aries moon has come out, and oh, that world is just so exciting, and there's so much going on, and there's so much to do and see and be and play with, and this is her, and that's that little moon of that little one coming out. So as I take you on this big subject of Uranus, I want all of you to remember, ooh. In evolutionary astrology, the archetype of Uranus, Aquarius, in the 11th house gets signified with mental trauma. It gets signified with trauma due to the fact that this archetype also represents what we would know as the individuated unconsciousness. In other words, what all of us as individuals hold below the surface in our own soul memories, far memories, past lives, whatever your languaging is. And so Uranus contains a lot of information for all of us. Very briefly, the 3 types of unconscious memories that exist with Uranus is what we would know as the far memory or the past lives of this and every lifetime we've lived here, there, and everywhere. It's where we go and access when we do our past life therapies or hypnosis, etc. Uranus also contains everything that we cannot accept or deal with in the present circumstances. The domain of Saturn and the individuated consciousness. Saturn always works to stuff whatever it doesn't want to accept or see in its life. Or does it stuff it down to Uranus, down below the surface? We want to forget about it. We want to ignore it. We're not going to talk about it. We're going to pretend it's not there. Uranus also contains the blueprints of the future, which is where we are going. And each of us, within our own soul, within our own brain, within our own mind, will receive these tidbits that pop up into consciousness in that Uranian fashion, which is bits and pieces of information that seem different or even radical than where we have structured our life in the current moment. And so when we find those blueprints of the future popping up at us, what we want to do is pay attention to the element of repetition. The more it comes up, driving your car, doing your dishes, as I like to say, the more it comes up, the more you better pay attention. And it doesn't matter how radical it is or how different it is from the present Saturnian moment. You need to move in that direction if it keeps coming up, because if you don't, then you get what you call those Uranian upsets that come back at you as shocks and traumas. We've all been there. We've all experienced that. Well, as we are working with Uranus leaving Pisces and entering Aries, we're starting a brand new Uranian cycle. So it's full of endings and new beginnings in about every way you can imagine. Bless Jupiter. Okay, Jupiter, the ability to put our life together and understand it on a conscious level, our individualized belief systems, philosophies, how we look at life. Jupiter traveling right now over this last year with Uranus has been very helpful in making sense of all of these Uranian tidbits that have been coming up. I'm going to work through, and that reminds me, there is a suitcase back there by the guy in the yellow shirt. I have a one-page handout. Basically, it's a listing of the dates of all of the, would you go, yeah, it's in one of the front flaps of the black suitcase. And it's got the Uranus dates of all the different Uranus generations. I thought it might be helpful if you had that for reference while we were looking through this. Because what we are going to do is we're going to go through these Uranian generations backwards through the zodiac. So we're going to start with someone like my niece, and we're going to end up with those of us who may be getting ready to experience our first Uranus return. But first of all, a few more tidbits on this whole archetype of Uranus, and again, its signature or association with trauma and shock and things that bring the radical changes in our life. The element of Uranus Aquarius in the 11th house is to help us decondition from the past and to liberate ourselves into who we truly are, to be an unconditioned soul, free, to experience our life however we desire. And so, when we are conditioned, which many of us are, who of us are not, when we are conditioned through human consciousness over the last 2,000 years of the Piscean age, the last 5,000-6,000 years, we carry layers upon layers upon layers of conditioning via previous experiences. And if those previous experiences have been not so pleasant, they will affect the soul. They will arrest the soul in its liberation process. I have 7 of the 10 planetary archetypes in either Sag or the 9th house. Pronunciation of words is an experience for me. I know things, I don't know how to pronounce things, and I get here on the planet, or on Hawaii, Aloha Huani is a real big step for me. So this whole area of previous experiences where it has not been pleasant, and it's arrested our soul and its ability to evolve and liberate and become. That area is trauma. And when we stuff it below the surface via Saturn, or it's there because of past lives, it has a tendency to operate unconsciously in triggering behaviors, triggering psychoses and neuroses and all of those happy little words that you hear about in your therapeutic fields. But if you then will look at where you have Uranus natally, by house and sign, that's going to be some of your biggest clues. You can also look to where you have Aquarius on a house cusp. You can look to planets in the 11th house. You can look to any aspects that interact with Uranus, Aquarius, 11th house planets, etc. All of that put together then starts to give you your own path for understanding where you carry this trauma within your soul. And so Uranus here, as it has been moving through Pisces over the last 7 years, Pisces being the domain of Neptune in the 12th house, that barrier between what's unconscious and what wants to come up and be revealed has been thinning, meaning all of us have found that these memories are coming up one way or another. Uranus in Pisces either through our dream world, Uranus in Pisces through any of our spiritual processes that we go through to open things up. But it's opening up for us whether we want to go there or not. And as we look at Neptune coming into Pisces over the next 14 years, get ready for even more. So I'm looking at this play between Uranus in Aries and Neptune in Pisces as just being, for the most part, a real opportune time to break free, to grow, to be who we want to be. And so Uranus in Pisces is finishing up an entire 84-year cycle of how we have lived life on the planet. And as you can see in this material world, we haven't broken out of the conditioning yet. As a matter of fact, you see those angles that just keep going further into the materialistic world, even more. Hey, just stay tuned. Pluto in Capricorn, I have its word there. But then, for those of us who show up in a room like this to study and learn and grow in these areas, we look back on the last 84 years, however long we've been here, and we're looking at every element of conditioning that we've had in our life, in this existence this time around. And Uranus in Pisces is triggering all of us on a conscious level. Oh, why am I doing this? This doesn't work anymore. This doesn't make sense anymore. Pisces, the beliefs on the deepest levels possible. Why am I here? What is my purpose through all this? All of these things are churning around for all of us right now and may be a real big indicator of why you wanted to show up here. And so then Uranus has to take all this information, and as it moves into Aries, it will create the energy to throw it off, to break free. When Uranus moves into the archetype of Aries, Aries being the initiator of the zodiac, wants complete and utter unrestricted freedom. It doesn't know where it's going to go, but it wants complete freedom to just explode. And if it does not have it, in an instant, it's angry, it's frustrated, it's upset. It gets, we all know that energy. And so we are all going to be going through this. And so as we are in relationship to each other, one of the things that we can all recognize through Uranus in Aries is just really giving ourselves permission to be upset, to explode. And then in our typical Aries way, I'm raising a teenager who has Pluto the soul in the first house. An Aries soul. It's been a real inspiration for me to watch that type of a soul explode, and the next moment it never happened. Oh well, that was yesterday. And so all of us are going to have to learn how to operate that way through Uranus in Aries. And when you run up against your frustrations, your rage, that part of you that just literally wants to explode or hit something, or go do your yoga, go take your cardio, but just remember that when that energy comes up, it's trying to teach you something. It's trying to show you where you have structured your life over eons of time and where you have structured your life up to this point that's no longer working. And that soul wants to break free. So you heard people speaking last night. You're going to probably hear it throughout this entire weekend. All of us are at this point that energy is coming up within us. And it means radical change, radically moving in a direction. Another thing that's typical about Aries energy, one of the ways I like to describe it is you see 10 choices in front of you. You can narrow it down to 5. You got to walk through and start 5 of them. And then you narrow it down to 1 or 2 from there. Aries learns through the action and then the reaction from the action. So all of us are going to make choices and actions over the next 7 years that may not be the directions that we want to go. But the actions are necessary because it then allows the brain to spark and ponder in whatever way it needs to gather the experience of where we're trying to go. So we have to learn when Uranus goes in Aries to really operate from here. Aries is the gut. Mars will rule this chakra right here, the solar plexus chakra. So all of us have to learn how to move forward in the gut instinctive level. I don't know why I'm moving this way, but this feels like the right way to go. So this is what I'm going to do. And this is what Uranus in Aries is inspiring us all with. I gotta make sure I keep this in. And so, is this working for everybody?
Yes.
What you want to hear? Okay. All right. I'll bring out more Uranus tidbits as I'm talking, but what I want to do is start becoming conscious of the time. I get to go till 11:30?
Yes.
Okay. Conscious of the time so we can make it all the way through the zodiac. And we are going to start with Pisces, so that 12th house is not left out. Yes?
Hopefully this is a brief question. So when you talk about the Uranus in Aries archetype of having to initiate and go from the gut level, how does that merge, or how does that go with the Neptune and Pisces surrender? Because it is going to be unknown. And how do you take all those impulses and surrender?
Okay, good question. I'll paraphrase for everybody.
Yeah.
When Uranus in Aries really asks us to move from that gut instinctive level, how do you relate that to Neptune in Pisces, which is asking for the ultimate surrender in every way possible? Uranus in Aries means that we must act. We must go forward. We must have that instinctive gut movement. And what will happen is, if it's not in our highest and best good, Neptune in Pisces will not allow anything to come from it. Neptune in Pisces will drop us back down into that void, back into that sense of what difference does it make. And if it is the right directions for us, as Uranus in Pisces, or Uranus in Aries says, you've got to move, you've got to do something. If it is the right direction, then Neptune in Pisces will miraculously part the sea for us and we'll move forward. And so Uranus must do the action, and Neptune will then be the fine-tuner that shows us the direction to go. Okay? Any other questions before I move into the archetypes? So as we work with how does Uranus in Aries affect all 12 Uranian generations, I'm going to do it by age, and I'm going to go from 0 to 84. And so as we work with how does Uranus affect how does Uranus in Aries affect the Uranus in Pisces generation, if you natally have Uranus in your 12th house, you will relate to what I'm going to talk about. So as we go through the 12 archetypes, you will each have 2 of those archetypes that will work for you. All right, so my handout made it, okay, handout made it, good. So the Uranus in Pisces group is basically these little souls who are just coming onto the planet, like my little niece I just described. And they are 0 to 7 years old. They're pretty small little things right now. And so as a generation, we're going to kind of philosophize on why they're here. They really came here to let go of lifetimes of old belief systems that no longer work. Lifetimes of old existences of how we put it all together, Pisces, that no longer work. So these souls, of course, one of the things that we work with in evolutionary astrology is the expansion of consciousness within the soul. 7 out of 10 consensus cannot think beyond the times that they live in. 2 out of 10 individuating, breaking out of consensus. 1 out of 10 spiritualizing, really trying to understand timeless universal laws and principles. Those expansions of consciousness, Saturnian, Uranian, Neptunian. And so in this small little generation of souls that we have coming onto the planet, there are going to be souls who are very disillusioned. Within these small little souls right now, they've had lifetimes of feeling lost and wandering. And Uranus is going to be trying to break all of that down. And so Uranus in Aries, if you have these types of little souls in your life, you need to be as honoring as possible of their own little moods. Those of us who are in this room can sensitize to these little souls. And when, a sweet little soul comes in and just says, I don't know what we're doing to the planet anymore. Uranus in Aries is going to go for them over the next 7 years, and it's going to rebirth them. It's going to give them the hope again and the opportunities to go forward. So if you have these little types of souls in your life, you want to carry on the conversation. You came here to help break down the old order, Uranus in Pisces. And Uranus in Aries is going to be sparking many of these little souls with what they do want to do on the planet. As we look at Uranus and Neptune in Aquarius and Pisces over this 15-20 year time period, there are some beautiful souls that are coming in. And they've been waiting for this time to help break down the old order and to bring the new. And so this is what you'll find with this Uranus and Pisces generation. Within there, there's going to be some very evolved little souls. Uranus and Pisces, and they just get the whole quantum physics thing. And Uranus goes into Aries for them, and they start to experience the waxing crescent phase, or the waxing new phase from 0 to 30 degrees of Uranus to natal Uranus, and they're going to spark all over. You're going to find that you'll see the child prodigies who come out with their own books and poems, and they aren't even in grade school yet. So we have a spectrum of these souls, from those that are so disillusioned to those that are just illuminating light and hope on the planet. And for those of you who, or if you know people who were here the last time Uranus was in Pisces, and they're now 84 to, what's that make them, 91? And so they've just experienced a Uranus return, and they're heading into a second Uranus cycle. A few tidbits on them. They're going to be experiencing some of the same things. Many of these souls could be going through some deep disillusionments because the body's wearing out, and they have to surrender, Pisces, all over again. And so it will be helpful to the degree that these types of souls are open. Again, I'm probably going to be paraphrasing souls who maybe are not so accepting of reincarnation. But we, as the youngers, talking to our elders, are going to want to help them understand, listen, you've done your time here. You get to go where it's really fun. You get to rebirth yourself. And so you would want to take those elders who are in their 80s, and to the degree that they are open, You really want to spark them. Well, if you could be free, Pisces, to have anything and do anything you wanted, Aries, where would you be? What would you do? You want to teach these souls as their body's wearing out to go back to the soul and rebirth their soul, to rebirth that creativity that it can exist within the mind, Uranus. And that's their hope. Whether they're going to be here for a while longer yet, or whether they're going to be there transitioning back to spirit world. You want to tell them, hey, get excited. You've done your time. Where do you want to go next? What do you want to do next? You know, one of the other things that is so strong within our culture, because we do not honor natural law, is the whole concept of reincarnation. And so I love it when I will bring a wise old crone in, let's call it that. You know, when we bring in our elders and we can say, well, what would you like to do next time around? This is what you need to be sparking. This is what you need to be looking for. And so that can just be so soothing for them, to give them life back in a different form.
I would also personally like to say, just from observation of people close to me and with elders, is that they're also, whether consciously or not, I know people whose like grandparents have just passed and things like that, and there's a very strong connection to the wisdom that they're leaving us with, which I think is also Pisces.
I'll paraphrase. So as we are watching our elders that leave the planet, let's keep their wisdom. Because as we know, when we go through that Saturnian space-time thing, the wisdom that comes through the experience being here in this human form of consciousness. Let me move on. We're going to go through 11 more archetypes. So then if we would look at the souls who are between 7 and 14, this is the Uranus in Aquarius generation. This is the generation that made the autistic disorder a household name. These are traumatized souls that have come in. These are also geniuses that have come in. We all know the sparks of genius that is within these young souls. But there are many in this Uranian generation that are between 7 and 14. And they have come here with Uranus in Aquarius because they really, really, really want to break free. Break free from lifetimes of traumatic experience. Break free from lifetimes, Aquarius is fixed air. So break free of lifetimes of mental conditioning that have them stuck or traumatized in all of the various ways. And so these types of souls can have all of the OCD complexes. You know what I'm talking about. They can have all those mental constraints where they just keep thinking the same old darn way. And as parents to these and grandparents to these souls, we're trying to help them look at something different. And sometimes they got to run up against that traumatic experience at this age to get them to look at something differently. So for them, Uranus in Aries is going to be building to that waxing sextile. And that's going to be a nice opportunity for these young kids because it's going to allow them to get past that mental stuckness of the fixed air that these Uranian and Aquarius kids have. And so Aries is going to put that energy out there that says, listen, we can look at it a different way. We can do it a different way. Let's try something new. And so actually, I think the next 7 years of Uranus in Aries is going to bring through many types of new therapies for any of these kids that would exist in what we will call that whole autism spectrum. In my other line of work, I work with these children quite a bit. And so it's real interesting to see how they come in their various different ways. The traumas are physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. But it seems to be that it's going to be the mental that's the key to helping them unlock. And so again, I think Uranus in Aries will help these souls really come through. There will be new technologies that come through that help them break out of those mental constraints. Now, the geniuses that are coming through in this age group between 7 and 14, when you see those types of kids, it's almost like with Uranus in Aries, you want to set them free from the traditional schoolings. You want to set them free from the traditional ways of doing things. They're going to be so smart, and they love to do the left brain thing that they fly through and they graduate at, from high school at 13. Or they just don't do it that way, and they've got to break free, and they've got to have some types of alternative schooling that really allow that genius, that beauty of the brain that many of us haven't tapped into yet. They've come in with it. They know it. They need to be able to set that free. Uranus in Aries. And so sometimes you'll see some of those kids really getting in trouble, so to speak, because Uranus in Aries, they want that freedom. They want that ability to just go out there and do and experience and learn what they know they can learn and put it on the planet. So if you see these souls in your life, you want to help out however you can to allow them to have that freedom. Make sense? The next generation is the Uranus in Capricorns. And these are the kids that are 14 to 21. And what also starts to come in with this generation then is when we had Neptune in Capricorn as well. And so that's a real interesting little blend that comes in with these souls. But the Uranus in Capricorns will represent souls who have past lives in which there has been so much Saturnian conditioning, whether it be through the familial dynamics, through the authoritarian parent, not always necessarily the father, sometimes mother, be it through lifetimes of having lots of power and control, be it through lifetimes of feeling the whole Capricorn depression, what's the use? Lifetimes where they haven't really been able to make it in the material world. There's going to be all kinds of scenarios, but with Capricorn, we're going to be dealing with conditioning. And what does ultimate conditioning do? It brings consciousness down into form. It brings consciousness down into that material world. And we look at all those material possessions as being the God. And so the Uranus in Capricorn generation, these are the souls that have to break free from the material conditioning in all the various ways. And so, again, what I see typically, and this is where my teenager fits into the group, is you're going to have the souls that are recognizing, because they're 14 to 21. They're graduating from high school. Some of them are going to college. They're trying to figure out how to get a job. And they all know about Pluto and Capricorn, even when they don't know that languaging. Won't be as good as it was for my parents or grandparents. It's not going to work for me anymore. So what we can have here is a generation that could be depressed and not knowing it, or depressed and maybe becoming conscious of it. And so Uranus in Aries is going to create the first quarter square for these kids at approximately 21. And what's there for them is to be able to break free. First quarter square is crises in action. We must break free from the past. And so what's there for these young souls is the ability to rebirth form. And so there will be sparks of these souls that as they can move out of their depression, these souls also will have a tendency to bring in the Pluto and Scorpio generation. I like to joke this generation is either going to destroy us or save us. And so there are going to be souls within this generation that will literally take recycling to a level we have no idea of being able to imagine. They're going to be able to take this material world and the stuff that we've been throwing away forever. They're going to go back to those garbage dumps and mine them. And they're going to be able to create new things that we can't even think of or imagine right now. That's the spark and the hope for this generation. And so if you have these types of kids in your life and they're depressed over this material world, they naturally are needing to go through this understanding that they cannot substitute stuff, things, for source energy, Gagatas. And so you want to work with them with that type of languaging. Listen, you've been trying to worship the material gods for too many lifetimes, honey. You've got to learn how to do this a different way. These are the ones, you think we need to free ourselves from materialism? Try Pluto in Scorpio that has Uranus and Neptune in Capricorn. I mean, they run around with 10 gadgets, and work that way. And so, not that they won't do great things with the gadgets, okay? But they also, if you have one of those, well, you lost your cell phone, oh well, gee. So this is the generation that can't keep track of their material stuff, and they always think, well, I'll just get another one. And so they have to run into this contraction of not being able to get another one as easy as they used to, so that they get this first quarter square from Uranus in Aries and either break free from the materialism or they learn how to be wiser stewards with it. And so I think this generation is going to be one of the tougher generations with Uranus in Aries, because they're not going to necessarily want to break out of the material world. One of the things, and this is the relationship, well, all of us have, and we can see it many different astrological ways, but, the past is secure because it came before and we know it. The future is insecure because it's unknown. And it takes a lot of courage to move into the future when you don't know where you're going. That's where that gut comes in. And so it's easier for this generation to just want to go back to more stuff. And it's not going to work. And so you're going to be counseling this generation for years to come as to why the stuff is no substitute. So Uranus in Aries, this is that opportunity for them. Some of them will radically throw it all off and they'll move out here to Big Island. Some of them will do it all over the planet. Wherever they land, they will learn how to be wiser stewards of their stuff, and they'll learn to spark the use of our resources, first quarter square, in much better ways. And they'll grow into their Uranus trines, and then we'll see it. We'll see them bring the actual stuff on the planet. Then we go to the Uranus in Sagittarius generation, and I'm going to need you to help me with the math as we go along here, because I'm in my right brain, and so this is going to be 21 to 28. So if I get my math wrong, help me out. And so the Uranus in Sagittarius generation, that's 21 to 28, I really like these souls. Oh, yeah. Because in evolutionary astrology, your mutable quadrant, which is Gemini, Virgo, Sag, Pisces, that will relate to what we would know as natural spiritual laws and principles. And nowhere do you see that signified more than Sagittarius. The Uranus in Sagittarius generation remembers what it was like to live in nature. We've all been there. We all have lifetimes there probably. But they remember what it's like. And so these are wise little souls. And just the whole element of Sagittarius, which is Jupiter, ninth house, it lends towards that right brain intuitive thinking. And so when Uranus sparks something for the Uranus and Sag generation, they go, wow, they automatically, Capricorn, nope, don't want to look at it, don't want to have to pay attention to it. The Uranus and Sag generation is like, wow, that's interesting, I get it, that's what I'm supposed to be doing here, that's what I'm supposed to be learning here. So these souls, they're going to be experiencing their first quarter trine. And this is where they blossom into who they are. And one of the things that you will find about the archetype of Sagittarius in Jupiter is truth versus lies. And when Sag is not in its truth, it compensates. So many in this generation compensate on who they really are. That Uranian part of ourself that can't decondition and liberate, Uranus and Sagittarius will try to pretend that, going to church on Sunday mornings and looking at the white man in the beard in the heavens really works. when they question it. And so they'll go, but they won't do anything about it. And so Uranus in Aries is going to come along with that waxing trine. This is going to be an easier aspect for this generation because they're going to have either an outer or inner event, Aries, maybe outer, that I can't do this. I've got to stand in my truth. I had a client last week, Uranus in Sag, who was in a relationship with a young woman, sat there and told me why it doesn't work and how he is counseling her and all this kind of stuff. And my little old nature really had to kind of get in his face and say, listen, walk your path. Be in your truth. How many women do you want to save before you have a good relationship? And so that's that compensation that will happen to the Uranus and Sag generation. So it won't be as hard as them, but they're going to have to find their truth somehow. And what happens every time we run into what we think is our truth, Gemini, polarity of Sag, someone bursts the bubble in it, and we involute, we get lost, we wander, until we have a new revelation that can come through. So Uranus in Aries is just going to spark revelation after revelation after revelation for these kids. Now, the other end of that spectrum was, bear with me, right brain, I don't remember who the conversation was recently, but sitting in the airport and watching this generation as we were going on the plane, and they pulled out their little Bible and they were reading the passages from the Bible. You will see the whole spectrum in regards to religion and spirituality with this generation. Those that are breaking free into natural law, and they're going to be the visionaries in setting up natural communities, and then those that will be the next generation of fundamentalism that will come onto the planet. You'll see those as well. And they'll have to go, depending on where they go. They may go through an entire lifetime of head in the sand, but they may go through those situations where they have the falls from grace with religion in order to help them spark. So Uranus in Aries over the next 7 years will help these souls liberate if they're interested in liberating. But because of the trine energy is so harmonious, when you're looking at waxing trines and waning trines, 120 and 240 degrees in the circle, it's also the couch potato aspect. Effort must be made in order to receive. And so that's where we can really bless Uranus in Aries, because it's going to give the punch that these souls need to walk their talk, to really break free and live a natural law life, which is what they're looking for.
I just want to comment, like when you were talking about your client who's trying to save this women, I know a lot of young men in this generation who are my dear friends, and I think inheriting a real teachership is actually a lot of, at least the more conscious ones, is an important part of their journey, but I also think there can be overcompensation and investment in that image that does kind of knock against their personal lives.
The Uranus in Sages who are looking for the guru or the teacher and projecting it outward, one of their lessons, Uranus, is to go towards the inner guru. Uranus in Aries, I'm my own guru, I'm my own teacher. And to claim back their own power of knowing what they innately know, Uranus and Sag.
Well, and that's the G-U-R-U, guru.
Yes,
Wow.
yes. All right, no comments unless you don't understand something, all right? We got to get through. So then we're going to go to Uranus and Scorpio. These are the little powerhouses on the planet. These guys are 28 to 35. What are they going through? They got that first Saturn return coming up here. And so they could be married, they have kids. The Uranus in Scorpio generation is going to have all of the traumas that will associate with emotional betrayals of trust. all of the relationship codependencies, as I call them, all of the sexuality issues. There's going to be a lot of woundedness around all of those areas. Also wounds around power versus powerlessness. And so this is a powerful little generation, you know, and they really do think they can be know-it-alls, whereas Uranus and Sag would be more gentle with it. The Uranus and Scorpios, there's going to be, it's fixed water, so that Uranus is going to be trapped in its emotions that are wounded. And what is Uranus in Aries going to do? It's going to make the waxing in conjunct, the 150-degree mark, and that's the inner crisis. That's the inner adjustment. And so Uranus and Scorpio is going to be out there, and you know they're going to pick up the sword when it comes to those relationships if they're trying to cover up the emotional wounds. And they're going to run up against that force that's larger than them, Uranus and Aries, and it's going to give them the emotional shocks. They have to watch re-imprinting their emotional traumas. And what Uranus and Aries is going to try to do is draw them inward, so that psychology of Scorpio can have them really reflecting on what it is about themselves emotionally that has created these types of situations in their life, that have created these betrayals of trust in their relationships, that have created these run-ins against powers of force that are larger than them that they can't do anything about. It's trying to get that mind to reflect inwardly. What is it that I must change within myself in order to rebirth my power out there in a different way? Now, you also will have that Uranus and Scorpio generation, you know, some of them, you know, that fight or flight. So you have the victim side of Uranus and Scorpio, or that codependent side, and who will love me? I always get left. I always, you know, blah, blah, blah. And so that same thing with that generation, you know, they could be wearing their emotional victimization on their sleeve. And it may be a little harder for this generation to really go in there and do that internal reflection, but that's what Uranus in Aries will do. And what they need to hear, Aries, who's the common denominator in all your relationship problems? Me. And so this is what they're going to be going through over these next 7 years. And so many of this generation, because again, we're at that Saturn return, but we're also 28 to 35, they may find themselves divorced and they don't want to be. You know, they may find the partner leave them. They may have to get the courage to leave the partner because they're living the lie, which Uranus likes to do when it's been too conditioned, and they've got to break free. Uranus in Aries. This does not work. I got to go real fast. And so then we move into the Uranus in Libra generation, which is where we're going to be 35 to 42, and we're going to have that Uranus in Aries opposition. Uranus in Libra, lifetimes of trying to figure out relationships and a sense of fair play. Lifetimes of dealing with issues around neediness and covering it up. Either the clingy side of Uranus in Libra, or the Uranus in Libra that goes, I'm not going there. And so what happens with Uranus in Aries is it's going to throw all of their relationship issues as well up into the air and point them back to themselves as well, because Aries opposition to Libra, that halfway mark. It's typically what we would call one of the signs for the midlife crises, the Uranus opposition. So for the Uranus in Libra generation, it's like, I have got to have a relationship with myself first before a relationship with anybody outside of myself will work. And as Uranus in Aries is kicking up all this stuff to do differently in their own inner relating, all the chaos that will come on the outer level of relating. The starts, the stops, the standing up for self, the learning how to listen, all of the things that come from Libra, that psychology of listening. The Uranus in Libra generation with Uranus in Aries may actually have people screaming at them if the walls are too high, to really get them to listen. And then you can have that Uranus in Libra generation in Well, again, the whole living the lie, the I'm going to be this way, and then I'm going to be this way, and then I'm going to be that way, and depending on who they're talking to and who they're relating to, I call them karma chameleons. And Uranus in Aries says, I got to be me, and I got to stand up for myself, and if I piss somebody off, oh well. And that's very hard for that Libra archetype to do, to stand in the conflict and confrontations, and it's exactly what Uranus in Aries is going to be making them to do. Comfortable with conflict. Hey, I'm making it most of the way. All right, so then we move on to Virgo, the Uranus in Virgo generation. Yeah, now we'll start getting into many of us in the room. The Uranus in Virgo generation can come through lifetimes of persecution and a sense of victimization. Lifetimes of all the sadomasochistic distortions. They can be on the victor end, they can be on the victimization end. Lifetimes of what we will call the existential void as well. Lifetimes of inferiority, superiority complexes that can come through. And so Uranus in Virgo can be a generation that mentally beats themselves up, inside out, upside down, all over the place. And one of the things that will be happening for them is Uranus in Aries will make the 210-degree mark, or what we will call the waning inconjunct. And that's outer adjustments. And so the Uranus in Virgo generation are going to be running into areas where their outer world doesn't work. They're so, Virgo's so left brain inwardly based, analyzing everything to pieces, that they get themselves in a crises after crises. Uranus in Aries is going to come along and it's going to create all of these outward events, all of these outward eruptions. And this generation is going to have to be very careful about re-imprinting all of their trauma signatures, Virgo, or being able to break free and go and just throw all that left brain analyzation off and just find a way to go, it is what it is. Perfection doesn't exist here. This is the way this is, and this is the way it's going to go. And so they don't get to have the perfect bodies anymore. Uranus and Virgo. Exactly. Having to evolve beyond what is, again, Virgo's an earth sign, so we have to evolve beyond that sense that everything has to be a crisis. That's where the Virgo needs to reach over to Pisces and, Neptune and Pisces. And, oh, well, this generation's going to have to let it all hang out and not worry, whether it's the body or the mind or how they live their life. All of those things, they're just going to have to really learn how to let go. And because it's a 210-degree aspect, the waning inconjunct, it's like 0 Scorpio. If they're not willing to let it go, the universe will remove it if necessary. And Uranus in Aries won't do it nicely. So for all the Uranus and Virgo people, when you see yourself getting into all those flusters and all those crises, what is it you need to let go of? What is it that you need to blast to the smithereens and just start over in a new way? Uranus in Leo. This is going to be the waning trine, reaching to 240-degree marks. For the Uranus in Leos, these are lifetimes in which they've wanted to be acknowledged and noticed as special. They may actually have had lifetimes in which they've had positions of the power or royalty. You read all that stuff. But these are, Uranus in Leo, these are souls who will love me. And what they've had to learn is inner love, self-love, the acknowledgement from ultimate source rather than the lover outside of them and everybody else that they're running around with. So if the Uranus in Leos have been doing their work, then Uranus in Aries will come along with this waning trine and give them rewards. They will be acknowledged. They will be noticed. If Uranus in Leo has not been doing its work, then Uranus in Aries will come along and nobody will see them. Nobody will notice them. They will have that period of falling over and nobody even noticed it happening. So Uranus in Leos, what you need to do through this through Aries is you really want to rebirth your self-love. You really want to rebirth it in every way you possibly can. See, universe agrees. And as you do that, my next thought was going to be, the universe will reward you. So it goes back to a deep inner self-love. And then Uranus in Aries will bring the natural ways in which you can see your creativity desired by the universe and reflected in the universe. Then Uranus in Cancer. These are going to be souls that are going to be facing their last quarter square, and I don't remember what their age group is, but you know, and you got the handout. Uranus in Cancer, these are going to be souls that, same thing, there's layers of emotional arrest from many lifetimes. So there could be all the familial dynamics again. But the Uranus in Cancer, you know, this is the, Jeffrey Green would always call them, you know, Betty Crocker Marble Man stuff. You know, we don't hear that so much anymore, but when, you know, that generation was going up, a man was a man and a woman was a woman, and don't you dare try to be any other way. So both Uranus in Capricorn and Cancer, and to some degree Aries, Libra, the gender issues are all there. And so the Uranus in Cancers, both genders, they're very, very sensitive. And so they are really having to go inward in regards to meeting all of their own emotional needs. And so Uranus has basically been liberating them on emotional levels throughout their entire lifetime. And so they're going to be getting to this last quarter square. And if this generation has been stuck in certain relationships for long periods of time, what's coming at this time? The leaving of the body, the partner dying, you know, facing their own mortality issues. Uranus in Aries can bring that type of stuff along. And so this generation, as we go through these last few generations, all of them, as we're getting into this waning side of life, we're going to have to be looking at releasing a lot of forms that no longer work. For the Uranus in Cancer, it's the emotional forms. And so there can be a lot of memories from childhood coming up, and a lot of memories from lifetimes that have been emotionally wounded, that are spontaneously going to come up into the surface, Uranus in Aries. And it's to make sense of them. This is the crises in consciousness aspect. And so we just don't want to wallow in the self-pity emotionally. Uranus Aries, we want to release the old emotional junk after we process through it, and we want to emotionally rebirth. Doesn't matter what age we are. And so this is what they need to really be searching for, is their emotional rebirth, setting themselves free. Uranus in Cancers, you know, I see these souls and they did all the trappings the traditional way. And these are the ones that want to come back around this next, you know, where they're still here and go off and live with somebody and mortify the kids because they're not married. You know, those types of things is what these souls need to do, the emotional freedoms that need to come in. Uranus in Taurus. Gemini. Oh my gosh. Uranus in Gemini, you know, these are the left brain souls. And these souls have been needing to quiet down their mind for their entire lives. You know, they can have very rigid ideas about how life should be. Gemini, it's this and it's that and it's this fact and it's that fact. And what is happening is they're going to be going through that waning sextile. And there's going to be an ease for them to throw off all kinds of old mental conditionings. However, the Uranus in Gemini has pondered the world and thought the world should be. Uranus in Aries is going, throw it away, it doesn't work that way anymore. Let it go. So these souls could actually youthen and go out there and have a lot of fun when they let go of all their rigid ideas and look at things new ways. I mean, these guys could be reverse hippies. And many of them, wanted to be back in that generation. They wanted to do it, and they just didn't have the courage, or they did. And so now they've got to figure out how to rebirth it all over again. But it's going to ask them to play and be flexible and allow sparks that will come in that shows them how their soul's going to do things differently. Gemini, flip the switch. All right? Uranus and Taurus. These are souls that will have all the past life conditionings in regards to material possessions and resources. There can be all of the memories of loss or barely being able to survive. And so they've spent a lifetime building up all kinds of possessions. And now they don't have the wealth anymore, or they don't have the bodies anymore. So Uranus in Aries is going to come along, and it's going to remove those possessions if it needs to be removed. It's going to trigger those fears of going back to nothing, and necessarily so they're needing to do that because they're going to reach that 330-degree mark, which is in that balsamic phase, which is returning to source energy. So all of this material world that the Uranus and Taurus has created doesn't work for them anymore. So they can either gracefully let it go, give it away. Uranus in Aries, that's what this generation needs to naturally do, and live very simply, Taurus. Or again, Uranus in Aries will forcefully remove that. So they go into an inner value system rather than looking through their values by how much stuff they have. And then we come to the Uranus in Aries generation, and we hit the Uranus return. These were souls that at the time they were born, they were quite liberators on the planet. And they were really busybodies, and they sparked a lot of stuff that created a lot of changes for us over the last 80-some years. And so these souls can have a sense of frustration because they're not young anymore. They don't have the freedoms they used to have anymore. They're in these bodies that are naturally wearing out, and I'm holding this mic all the time, so I'm like going right into it as I'm talking. But this Uranus in Aries generation, they don't have this body that works anymore. And they're naturally, it's a natural time period to be able to release that old physical form. But again, sparking the head. What do you want to do when you leave here? Where do you want to go when you're back to spirit world? You could talk to these souls about doing those types of things and sparking those types of things. Many of these souls will get visions as they are winding down here that somehow, some way will be recorded, and it will set us up for the next Uranus generation cycle. So these Uranus and Aries souls that are approaching this Uranus return, they're not only going through all of their own individual rebirthings, Aries, they also are sparking. Think about it. Uranus in Aries, the freedom to just break free in whatever way we need to, individual and collective conditioning. And we have a generation of souls who's been all the way around the zodiac with Uranus. Look at the experiences that they've gained. If you know somebody who's in those late 70s to early 80s and approaching this Uranus in Aries return, you want to gather their wisdom. You want to know, what do you think? What are your visions about the future? Where do you think the planet's going to go? What could you share with us? Where do you think we should take things? Get that Uranus in Aries energy that they've got so much wisdom with, and have it spark us as we go forward. That's what the souls who are going to come in through Uranus and Aries are doing. They've come here because they want to help us do it differently. And many of those little Uranus and Aries souls, they are ready. They've got the ideas, and they're going to come here and they're going to be a lot more free than us. So again, the older generation, get the wisdom that they already have and ask them how to go forward. The new little ones that are coming in, hey, welcome. Thank you for showing up. One question?
Because that generation has natally the square to Pluto in Cancer, how do you see that all playing out with this Pluto square Uranus that's evolving?
You know what? I see many of those souls as really having to shed lifetimes and lifetimes of old emotional conditionings. Many of us know them as either parents or grandparents, and you know, it was never as good as yesterday for this generation. And they're having to return to the womb. And I'm watching a father-in-law do that, and I'm watching him return to the womb through the big cancer issue. And he's actually becoming more and more joyful and more playful, and we're being able to enjoy ourselves with him, unlike my husband ever did when he was raising him as a father. So if that, and in my own case, my own father had a granddaughter come in, the little 1-year-old that I talked about. I've seen my Pluto and Cancer Marlboro man dad get down on the floor and roll and play and bark with the doggy and do all kinds of things. So if that generation will just let go and give themselves the freedom, oh man, they're going to be fun.